Welcome to Imperial Talks. Good morning, good afternoon to all of our colleagues that are joining us from across the country via live stream. We've got St. John's, Sarnia, Nanticoke, Finch Terminal, Strathcona, Cold Lake, Curl, and Norman Wells on the phone today. Awesome. My name is Laura Bishop. I work in Public and Government Affairs, and I'm also one of the organizers with this awesome team who helps organize Imperial Talks. Before we start, I have a question for all of you. When is the best time to plant a tree? Just shout out your answer, whatever you think it is. Today. 20 years ago. Okay. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today. Today's about ideas empowered. It's about transforming inspiration into action. Over the last couple Imperial Talks, we focused on disruption and how it's critical to survival. And we've also talked about fear and busting through the fear factor and not letting it impede success. And today we have an incredible lineup of speakers whose stories of perseverance are remarkable. And they're here to talk to us about how to bring your whole self to work, how to be agile, and how to just get after it. But before I introduce them, we actually have a little surprise for all of you, and for all of you at all the sites across the country. We've hidden golden tickets in Calgary and at all of our sites. And if you're lucky enough to find one of those tickets today, you and 9 of your team members are going to win core strengths training. And if you've taken this training, it's not about an ab workout. It's about opening your mind and leveraging the best of those around you. Now, if you've already taken the training and you find a ticket, pay it forward and pass it on to someone else. So to find out if you're a winner, please check under your seat now. And at the sites, please check under your seats. Woo. Awesome. Now, awesome. So if you've won everything you need to know about the opportunities on your ticket, 2 of you will have also found a signed autograph book from our very own Kathy Turcaro from Curl, who will be speaking to us later. So thank you, Kathy, for that. Awesome. All right, let's get after it and welcome our speakers.
The Avengers might have Captain Marvel and Iron Man and even an Ant-Man. But today, Imperial Talks has brought together a trio of real no capes required. Our first speaker is Changemaster Dave, also known as Dave Dame. By day, he is Scotiabank's Vice President of Agility, and when duty calls, he puts his Six Sigma black belt to work. Dave provides coaching and mentoring on agile management to IT companies across Canada and the US. In his own words, he is a boring cat, not terribly exciting, just trying to live an average life. That can't be easy when you are a Toronto TEDx star. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Dave Dame. We are very appreciative that our next speaker was able to pinch hit for Simon Donato, who was unable to make it, but he was still able to provide the stoked oat snacks for this morning. And it's those snacks that give our next speaker energy for miles. Kick-Ass Penny, also known as Blaine Penny. Blaine holds Guinness World Records and is a 3-time Canadian ultra marathon champion, winning his first by over 1 hour even after rerunning the last 10K. Yes, that's a total of 90 kilometers. Outside of being an endurance athlete, Blaine is the co-founder and CEO of Mito Canada and the former CEO of Integrated Sustainability. He has been recognized for his community contributions with the Dave Kelly Live Award, Calgary's Top 40 Under 40, and is an official kick-ass Canadian. Please welcome Blaine Penny. And finally, a hero of Imperial's very own, Tonka Takaro, aka Kathy Takaro. Kathy hasn't only moved virtual mountains to achieve her goals. She recently finished the final 4-kilometer stretch to Mount Everest Base Camp with a badly sprained ankle. When she isn't sporting FRC coveralls and piloting massive trucks at Curl, she is helping women and youth in impoverished countries around the world. And she also found time to write a book. Here she is, Kathy Takaro. Please welcome our speakers for the 3rd episode of Imperial Talks.
Can you hear me now? We're good. Okay. Hi. I honestly have to say, I have the best job in the world. And I mean that. Not only do I work for Imperial, I drive the biggest truck in the world. Look at that beast. Tell me that is not cool. I mean, come on, if that's not impressive, I don't know what is. I want you to imagine for just a second that you're driving along in a pickup in the mine, and over the crest of the hill, you see a 2.5-story high, 3,800 square foot monster of a machine weighing in at 1 million pounds of metal, carrying 400 tons of dirt on its back, and it's barreling down the road coming right at you doing 70 kilometers an hour. Do you not hope and pray that operator's having a good day? Do you not hope that operator is focused on the task at hand, like the road, and fully aware of his or her surroundings and not worried about the problems they're having at home? You sure do, right? So at Curl, we have some of the biggest equipment in the world. And over the last 6 years that I've been working there, I have come to the conclusion that operating heavy equipment is men's best kept secret. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Ladies, it is so much fun. It is, and challenging, but most of all, it's empowering, yeah. So ladies, if you're looking for a career change, by golly, you step into my office for a day, you come for a ride along with me, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Oh yeah. Now, as much as I love my job, as I clearly do, right, I gotta admit that life wasn't always so, what's the word, peachy, I guess? It's interesting how life has a way of pulling at you in different directions, so just to see how you're gonna react. And I truly, truly believe that it's how you view that experience is what's gonna determine your future. Now, this is why I say this, is because in 2011, I slashed my arm in a drunken moment that I do not remember. I ended up losing everything I owned. I was on the streets of Edmonton, drunk and homeless at the age of 42. You want to talk depressed? Holy. So on the 7th day of being homeless, I meet this guy, Toothless Joe, honestly. And he's quite content with his way of living, and that's fine. But he slaps me on the back, and he goes, "This is the life, live it, love it," this big toothless grin. When he did that, it's as if that cloud of depression, that fog that I've been carrying around forever, it just shattered into a million pieces. And for the first time in a very long time, I saw crystal clear. I'm looking at my very dismal surroundings, and I look at him and I said, "What did you just say?" I said, "This is not my life. I don't care what you think is okay, buddy, but this is not my life." I even stomped my foot because although I had nothing, I mean, no hope, I mean, I was even robbed. I had no identification. I literally had the clothes on my back. The one thing I did have was my mind. And in that moment, I made a decision that I was going to do whatever it took to get away from that guy. Right? So I turned around, I sobered up, and I took time off of life so that I could actually address 40 years of repressed trauma and pain. Now, this entire moment with him was actually the starting point for me of turning ideas into action, because I took a very desperate situation and I flipped it around into a golden opportunity to recreate a better version of Kathy. So before Toothless Joe, I actually had a really good career. I was a nurse for 13 years. Look at that picture. It was the proudest achievement of my life at that time. You can never tell from that picture that 6 years prior, I had been gang raped in Montreal at the age of 19. Or that at 18, I had been drugged and raped by a photographer after a modeling session in Miami. Or that at 14, I had been violated by my very first boyfriend. Or that since I've been a small child this high, I've been subjected to every abuse imaginable, growing up in a really violent and dysfunctional home at the hands of a man who was a pillar in the community, loved by all, but at home, behind closed doors, he was a monster. And you never know it from that picture, because I had truly fooled myself into believing that I'd overcome all that. Look at me now, I've got this great career, this bright future. I mean, who cares what happens in the past stays in the past. You know, I'm tough, I'm a survivor. How many people say that about their past issues? There's a really big difference between overcoming something and locking it away in that vault deep inside you, never to look at it again. I spent my entire nursing career wearing this mask because I was really good at taking care of other people's pain, because it took me out of my own. I never realized for 1 second that I was a walking wound, that the pain I carried inside that vault was actually festering and had become so infected that all my decisions were based on low self-worth and a negative core belief. This directly impacted the men that I chose. From 2000 to 2007, I was subjected to every form of domestic violence you can imagine. Just to name a few, I lived with a shovel on my porch as a reminder of what I was going to be buried with. I miscarried due to violence. I was stalked, I was strangled. I was under constant death threats of being sold into human trafficking. I mean, the list goes on. I was nursing in and out of women's shelters, and nobody at work knew because of the mask. You know, we tend to build this great wall of China around ourselves to protect us from outside emotional forces, but in reality, the illusion is that we're trapping inside what we don't want the outside world to see, especially not our coworkers. God forbid were they to find out that you don't actually have a white picket fence, that maybe you don't even have a fence, that maybe you're so far lost in left field that you're looking for the goat trail to come back home. Nobody can know that. You just don't know what the person sitting beside you right now is going through. How many of you came here today wearing that mask? You know, we talk about diversity and inclusion, but the one thing we never talk about is the deeper roots of safety, and that's mental health and wellness in the workplace. That taboo topic that, oh, no, we just can't discuss. We as leaders need to be able to look at ourselves and address outstanding issues in order to teach others how. We need to be able to recognize that being vulnerable and different is okay, but more importantly, that it's okay to not be okay. Now, before coming here, I was asked, Kathy, what steps did you take to go from Toothless Joe to be standing here on stage today? And I actually really had to stop and think about that. It's not like I had a magic formula. I just did what I needed to do at the time to get where I wanted to be. But when I really thought about it, I actually came up with these steps, because I realized when I'm standing with Toothless Joe, these are my choices. Toothless Joe, change. Toothless Joe, change, right? I had to dig really deep in order to find that fire inside of me and believe in the person I wanted to become, not that mess that I left behind. I knew there's something way more to me than what I was living at the moment. So although I was shaking in my boots and filled with fear, I can tell you right now, I kept moving because the desire to change my life overruled any fear, any insecurity I felt along the way. I mean, you want to talk mountains of obstacles between then and now. Huge. But the biggest obstacle was me. I had to learn to step out of my own way, my negative thinking, get rid of my bad habits, and release myself from the prison of my own mind in order to let endless positive possibilities enter my space. So at the same time I was my own obstacle, I was also my own solution. But that took a lot of mindset training, learning to flip over, learning to think a new way, be creative in my thinking. I had to learn that when people said, oh, Kathy, just think outside the box. I'm like, what box? I didn't know there was a box. You're limitless to what you can achieve if only you set your mind to it. If you believe in yourself enough, you can do anything. I'm standing here today. You can do anything. I took a step every single day towards my goals and dreams, and I still do. I mean, yeah, bottom line is, you gotta run when you can, crawl, or walk if you have to, crawl if you must, cry if you need to, Miss Niagara Falls over here, but you just don't give up. Just don't give up. And this applies to every single person sitting here and watching this. It has nothing to do with your job title. This is you as a human being. So then I started to think, okay, well, what kind of characteristics did I have to pull myself through all this, right? And I realized it wasn't so much about the characteristics that I had, I mean, besides being resilient through mountains of adversity, it was more so recognizing everything I was not. And what I mean by that is that I am not the sum of all the lies that have been fed into me since childhood. I am not defined by my past, and I am most certainly not defined by the opinions of other people. I had to unlearn, relearn, and accept that I am who I believe I am. More importantly, I am enough just the way I am. And that took 50 years to say, that particular part. Okay, in 2017, I wrote my book, Dream Big, and with the intent, the target audience of being women in shelters, youth, people that are suffering depression or similar issues, such as myself. And as it's about to be released, I go in front of I realized, oh my God, people at work are going to know everything. This book is not censored. You want to talk panic and anxiety through the roof? I took it to a whole new level. Like, until I realized, wait a minute, don't you tell me these big tough guys that work operating equipment don't have life problems, right? So with that, I went in front of my crew of 140. I put this picture up there. I said, you see that book? It's not about mining. It has nothing to do with mining. So I said, I kind of told him, okay, a little bit about my life, a little bit about the challenges and what I did, the changes. And I said, I'm not asking you to buy the book, but if you know someone who's suffering, who's hurting, who's going through some issues, maybe pay it forward for them. Because maybe all it takes is one sentence in that book for them to find the courage to take the next step. Well, by golly, I was so surprised because what that did, by my show of being vulnerable in front of my crew, what that did was start conversations in the workplace. Other than how's the weather, oh, what'd you do on days off? Nothing like that. People from all departments suddenly are coming to see me and actually talk about real life. And that is the best gift I could ever ask for. It was priceless. Now, at work, I started a work boot recycling program. I have since collected 2,700 pairs of boots. These get distributed all over Edmonton to safety programs that give free safety tickets to people that can't afford it. And the reason I did this is because when I had the opportunity with Imperial, I didn't have any money and I didn't have boots. You want to talk about a barrier? Boots, right? So a girl gave me boots so that I could enter the Women Building Future program and then change my life. So when I got to site and I see people throwing away all these perfectly good boots, I'm like, oh, no, you're not. I'm like, oh, no, you're not. So what I did is I started this, they actually built me bins. This picture was taken last week. This happened overnight. A mountain of boots, and these are some of my coworkers that were kind enough to help me pack them up and get them ready for shipping. It has been by far a great gift. Also, another thing that I do at work is on my days off, I should say, this job allows me, because I work 10 days on, 10 days off, and I get a month vacation, so I have time to travel. And what's really important to me is it's about giving back to communities. And I started a Hands of Hope project in Grenada because the country is overwhelmed with like child sexual abuse. 1 in 2 children are being sexually abused down there, so I'm a big advocate. I work for them towards change. I work with women in shelters. These are some of the projects that I do with some of the kids. I bring school supplies. I work with women in prisons. And I'm not just talking Grenada. I mean everywhere I go. And so I work directly with communities that are craving change. I was recently in India, Nepal, Tibet, Mount Everest. I mean, come on, base camp, hobbled my way up there. Said if I'm making it a base camp, and regardless if I have a sore foot, I am making it to the top with a picture and a flag, right? Anyway, I've been to Singapore. I've been on TV, on radio, on newspapers, magazines, all this stuff. My book is now it's in French, and so I'm going to be going to Africa for a French book launch with Caterpillar over there. I'm working with the International Organization of Women in 3 different countries out there. I'm going to be in Las Vegas next month at a Her Story Global Empowerment Conference. I mean, my God. I plan on going to Australia for a month. And when the book is out in Spanish next year, I'll be all over South America. So as all these miracles are coming my way, and I'm thinking, wow, how does this even happen? From one decision, right? So the only thought that I have, honestly, is, wow, if only Toothless Joe could see me now. Thank you very much. That's all. Thank you. Yeah. We're good.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Kathy. That was so inspiring. And there was one of the messages in there that really stood out for me was not knowing what other people are going through in their lives. And I think there's one thing I can take away from that is always giving people the benefit of the doubt. And I think we're sometimes rushed to conclusions when we have an interaction with someone. You never know what's going on in someone's life. And I'm going to share a story today about some of those challenges that I've faced in my life. So who here today has children under the age of 4? Yeah, it's a lot of hands. So 11 years ago, that was me as a parent. I forgot to hit the slides here. And this was my beautiful family 11 years ago. I had a little boy, Evan, who was about to turn 4, a daughter, Julia, on the verge of turning 2 and taking over the world. Now she's a teenager and taking that to a whole new level. But life was pretty much perfect. We had these 2 beautiful children. We had a world in front of us, of a life that we could envision, of how we wanted to raise our children. We had great jobs, both working as engineers, happened to be in Calgary, had a great time when jobs were abundant in the engineering field, and life was pretty much perfect. It's my boy, Evan, and those eyes still haunt me today when I look at this picture and other pictures like that. But he just had a way of connecting with people. He was a beautiful little man, little boy, so bubbly, so talkative. And he literally woke up one morning with a sore stomach. And I was in pain. Daddy, it hurts. So we took him to the hospital. Get to the hospital. And they suspected appendicitis after doing an ultrasound on his appendix. They couldn't see it, so they said, well, it's either ruptured or it's hidden. We should just take it out. No problem. Wheel him in the surgery. And Evan looks up at me with those eyes, and he says, Daddy, can we play together again sometime? And I froze. And it was just so out of the blue. and I didn't know what that meant, but I felt something powerful there. Evan goes into surgery. They take his appendix out. Turns out his appendix was fine. Evan didn't wake up, and he wasn't fine. They initially thought he had a reaction to the morphine, weren't too concerned. Time went by, 12 hours, 24, 36 hours, and Evan had slipped into a coma. He didn't open his eyes, and had suffered a severe brain injury. He was rigid as a board, stiff as a board, and we were shocked. Just like, this is just like a nightmare that just unfolded in front of us. And it took about a week before Evan even opened his eyes. And through that period, we had a lot of doctors looking at Evan, trying to understand what was going on. And they diagnosed Evan with a brain injury, a neurological disease called ADEM, which stood for acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. So it's kind of like a one-time autoimmune attack on the brain, shut his brain down. So we were trying to absorb and understand what that meant for Evan, what that meant for us, learn a little bit more about the disease. The good thing was 9 out of 10 kids would fully recover. You know, it's just demyelination on the brain. So we go, all right, we're going to fix Evan. You know, we got to rehab him. We just got to get him back to health. And so we started down that path. And unfortunately, Evan didn't improve. He started getting worse, started developing seizures. And through that period of him developing those seizures, it was clear that something underlying, there was something more going on there. And at that time, Evan wasn't even stable enough to do more testing, but they suspected an underlying genetic disease. And it took a year, and Evan got diagnosed with a mitochondrial disease. And we had never heard of a mitochondrial disease before. The doctor explained it to us. We then turned to Dr. Google shortly after that. But for those of you who don't know, mitochondrial disease is a genetic disease that affects your body's ability to produce energy at the cellular level. Evan had been living with a mutation and a disease that just hadn't manifested, and a stress on the body, whether it was the anesthetic or the surgery, or maybe the disease was slowly progressing before that. His disease manifested, and in that time, his body had an energy crisis and shut down and shut his brain down. So this was our new reality. We, in a way, lost our little boy. Evan he's a spastic quadriplegic overnight. He's nonverbal. He's tube fed. And he's completely dependent on us for everything in his life, from changing his diaper in the morning to feeding him to his exposure, his life, everything revolves around what we do for him. So this was obviously a big transition in our family life, to figure out this whole new path of looking after a child who's got a severe disability, and also trying to treat and look after the underlying condition that caused this. It's been a tremendous journey for my wife and I. Obviously for Evan, he's been through so much. He's been through countless surgeries as he's grown to deal with some of the challenges he's had. But through all of this, and this adjustment, as you can imagine, there's a lot of tough days. But one thing we learned through all of this is that you have a choice. This has been a really tragic thing that's happened to us and to Evan. I would trade places with him in an instant if I could. Anybody who has a child, it's one of the most heartbreaking things to see your child sick. And to the degree that Evan's had to endure, it's unbearable as a parent, and you never feel like you can do enough. But you do have a choice. There comes a point where you have to either accept and move forward, or you can look back and dwell on how unfair life is, and why Evan, why us, how did this have to happen? But we chose to look ahead and try and provide the best life we could for Evan and our family, and make the most of this tragic situation, and to put a smile on Evan's face whenever we could. So as a family, we try to be very active. We were a very active family before kids, and one of our dreams with our children was to show them the world and to experience all the cool things that we thought they should experience. So we've taken Evan to the beaches of Newfoundland, where I grew up. He gets to spend time with his relatives and his family out there, to skiing at Sunshine. I take him on my bike wherever I can go. I run with him. He loves being outside. He loves that fresh air on his face and that stimulation. Again, he just sits there and is exposed to whatever we can expose him to. That's his world. That's his life. But also something that we learned through this is that our daughter Julia, she needs to have a life too. And also for us to look after Evan. This is an extremely challenging, and it's a huge burden on a marriage, to be honest. Like it's extremely stressful. But we recognized how important it is for us to look after all those components of our life so we can be the best parent that we can for Evan and be together as a family. But also what it's taught us is that I think a lot of times we can be living our life and thinking about what's next or when I get here and when I get there. Evan's our daily reminder that there are no guarantees in life. And that can change tomorrow. Our drive home today from work, we could get T-boned at an intersection and our lives could change. There's so many things that can change in our lives. So nothing is a gimme. I wake up in the morning and that first cup of coffee, I enjoy that so much. It's the here and the now and being in the present. So it's really taught us to live for today and knowing that we do not have those guarantees. And I've always been an athlete. From a young age, I've really enjoyed endurance sports. And this life that we have with Evan is like an endurance sport. It's like an ultra marathon. And I fortunately had running in my life, and it became that much more important after Evan got sick. And I remember a doctor pulling us aside in those early days and saying, you know what, you cannot be here 24/7. You need to look after yourself. If you don't look after yourself, you can't look after Evan or your family, and this whole thing falls apart. And that's where it really hit me. And that's when exercise and moving every day and running became like my oxygen and my fuel. I knew that if I didn't do that, then the stress would build, and I know that it was just going to be that much more challenging to do the work that we needed to do to look after Evan. So, despite all those challenges, I told myself, I'm going to challenge myself to the max. I know that's what makes me the best person I can be, and through that, I've been able to run ultra marathons through these crazy mountains, to getting chased by cars in this Red Bull World for Life run, to running several 2:30 marathons when I never thought that was possible. But that changed my view of what is possible. From a career standpoint, I was working at Worley Parsons at the time when Evan got sick, and I remember thinking, wow, I just got to stay in this little security blanket because I've got a sick child. We need the benefits and all those sort of things. And I had a great job. I really enjoyed my job. But also, I had a new sense of purpose in my life, I felt. And at the time, we had gotten together with some other families and we're starting to look at starting a charity for mitochondrial disease. And fortunately, through that time at Worley Parsons, they were very accommodating with the challenges that we had. But also, it encouraged me to pursue opportunities as opposed to sitting and waiting for them to happen. And I had a mentor that I met at that time period who really challenged me to write out a career plan, not just a career plan, but a life plan. How does your job fit into your life? Think about your life as a whole. What are you doing today? How does that help what you want to do tomorrow? And I realized at that point that I wanted to spend as much time as I could giving back to others based on the experiences that I had. So I took on some different roles to gain different skill sets to be able to eventually scale and an impact on the world, which was my goal, which took me through to Mito Canada. And through that journey, I had the honor of meeting David Johnson. And there's a great quote I pulled here that I thought was relevant for this talk. And I attended the 2015 Governor General's Leadership Conference. It's an amazing conference that pulls together about 250 of leaders across Canada through the different sectors. And we actually had to present to the Governor General. So I had that honor, and it was a real pleasure. But Mito Canada started by families coming together through a need. At the time Evan was diagnosed, had never heard of this disease. There was no organization. Our doctor pointed us to the US. So we got together Sunday nights, and we're on the phone talking about what it is that we want to do. And we decided we wanted to raise awareness because it's, so few people know what this disease is, and supporting families and the journey to understand how you can get the supports you need. And clearly, research was an area of focus that was required and significant funds around that. But it had a bold vision to one day cure this disease. So I poured myself into that as a volunteer in the early days. We got the organization started 9 years ago. And one of the big things that we've done to, try and bring ideas to life, raising awareness for a charity amongst 86,000 other charities in Canada is kind of tough. There's a lot of noise out there, so you've got to be unique. So we started an initiative called Team Mito, which is basically getting people together for events, much like running at the Calgary Marathon, and trying to raise awareness and funds for mitochondrial disease. So over the last number of years, we've done 11 Guinness World Records. And there's one that really stands out, which was in 2017. We completed the Guinness World Record for the most linked runners to complete a marathon. So our goal was, this was Canada's 150th, so we call it the Mito Linked 150. So we wanted to get 150 people, tether them all together with surgical tubing, and raise $150,000 for charity. So we managed to get 112 people through a self-selection process, which was quite interesting. And on the day, we stitched everyone together, tied them up with this tether, and we all stayed tied together for the full marathon, 6.5 hours. And if one person became disconnected, we lost the whole thing. But it was incredible. We raised $165,000, and we got international press, and it was incredible, the awareness that we raised through that. And then on the research side of things, we've been really strategic in how we wanted to make an impact. So we want $1 to turn into $2 or $5 or potentially a company. So we've been able to invest dollars that have had over $1 million worth of impact. We've invested in a couple of PhD students to draw them into to that research field. And we've developed next-gen sequencing diagnostics here at the Alberta Children's Hospital, and also founded the Canadian Mitochondrial Research Network called MitoNet. And also some of our research grants have stemmed some spin-offs with some biotech and diagnostics companies here in Calgary and in Hamilton, Ontario. So, through all this, there's a million things we want to do, but one of the next big ideas that we see that's going to be extremely powerful is building a data informatics platform called MitoCode. And we're working with a group in Ontario called InDoc Research, who built the brain code with the Ontario Brain Institute and have built an open source platform that's had about $100 million invested into that. So we're going to be able to take that and customize it to look at patient data that's specific to mitochondrial disease, that can empower patients to connect with others that have this disease, understand how those symptoms are being managed and what's effective, but also empowering researchers to have access to that data. Last but not least, I'll leave you with this slide and a message at the end here. So back in 2013, the first Guinness World Record we did was 10 people linked together, and it was a speed record. So I remember Monday morning walking into a Starbucks, and I looked down and I see a newspaper, and it had this picture of us on the front with this record-breaking run. I thought, that's pretty cool. And then I looked up, and I read this sign from the Calgary Marathon that said, "Success doesn't come to you, you go to it." And I just thought, wow, that just really hit home. Thank you. Appreciate your time here. Thank you.
maybe I set unrealistic goals for myself. But you know what? It's an unrealistic world. So if I don't set unrealistic goals, I won't make it in this world. If nothing more today happens, I hope somebody, as Carrie inspired me, hopefully I was able to inspire someone else to do something for a cause and be able to have this kind of feeling to give to a cause. When there was those moments where I didn't think I could go anymore, the cheering, the people with me were giving me that energy, and I was feeding that energy. But looking back on today, being around with so many people achieving the 5K, it feels awesome. Before I start my talk today, I'd like to thank Jennifer for sharing her story of vulnerability, and Blaine, as somebody with being a child with a disability that I was fortunate for my parents not to give up. On behalf of all of them, I'd like to thank you for not giving up. So before I started my talk, I wanted to just kind of acknowledge that. If you heard before coming to the talk today that a male in his 40s walked 5K, you'd be like, so what? But after you watch that clip, you realize success depends on the perspective in which you look at something. And on that day, I changed the perspective of what somebody with a disability could do. In my video, I state, I might set unrealistic goals, but you know what? It's an unrealistic world. So if you're not gonna set them, you're just not gonna make it. And I'm on stage in front of you today because I've set unrealistic goals. I have cerebral palsy, but cerebral palsy doesn't define me. I'm one of the world leading experts in Agile and change management. So what is Agile? Agile is simply a framework that helps with deal with complexity and unknown. It really helps organizations go from let's plan everything up front and deliver it to what can we build, can we deliver incrementally, and what can we learn from what we built? Because we're in a learning mechanism, because customers are changing faster than ever. And if we can't predict the future, the next best way is coming up with a framework that we can inspect and adapt as we go. This talk simply isn't about agile practices, but what I'm gonna give you as leaders to really be able to build the tools where organizations can thrive and change in agility, because we need to keep pace and we need to manage the scope of risk with innovation as it goes. Today's talk is transform ideas into action. Transform assumes change, and change is both scary and exciting. But we need to change. Our customers are more demanding. Technology is changing quicker than ever. And the speed and everything is changing around us. So the important is we need to change to be able to move that quickly. Because if not, we're just gonna not make it. And everybody has their own struggles to push through. As you can see, walking 5 kilometers isn't natural for me. But what I did was I set a vision, I set a goal, and I really worked closely to adapt it. I'm gonna share with you today how growing up with cerebral palsy has given me the instinct advantage of helping organizations and leaders push through their disability. Now, they don't have cerebral palsy, well, not all of them, only the cool kids. But they have the inability to change from their status quo. So let's look at change out there in the world. Blockbuster, who can tell me about them? Oh, thank goodness, you guys remember Blockbuster. Who can tell me what happened to Blockbuster? Netflix, right? Technology came, disrupted them. So no longer did we have to go get a video and rent it. We could sit on a couch and binge watch our heart's convene. Kodak, what happened to them? What? iPhones, but digital. But what was interesting about Kodak was they were actually the first ones to invent digital, but they didn't want to sell it because they didn't want to disrupt their film business. So they let someone disrupt them before they could disrupt themselves. And when I got to go into organizations, I help them disrupt themselves. Now, there's been organizations that have done well through change over the years. I'm going to use a banking example because I might be a little partial. Let's look at the ways our parents used to bank. They used to have to try to plan their day to go to the bank during banking hours, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And then they had to plan their bills and everything. And then in came the bank machines. No longer were you restricted to the times or locations. Then telephone banking, and then internet banking, and now mobile banking. Why do I like digital banking? It allows us to do banking while we're living our lives. We don't have to plan for banking anymore. We can go to our kids' recitals. We can go to their sporting games and do that banking. Nobody's ever going to get excited about banking. Nobody gets up and goes, yay, I get to adult today. What bills can I pay? But if we can make it frictionless and let them do it while they live their lives, that's responding to change. But what makes change so hard for the Blockbusters and the Kodaks? They're leaving their success story that's been told time and time again to a story that's not yet been written. We have to get comfortable at being uncomfortable. So I'm going to share with you today 3 things that I help organizations do to position them to change are the 3 same things I experienced in dealing with a world that wasn't ready for somebody with cerebral palsy. It's co-creating the change with your people and using their diverse perspectives. It's pushing decision-making down to make everybody a leader. And 3, you must make it safe to fail. So I learned about setting a vision and working with my people from my parents. In 1971, my parents were told, David may never be able to live past 12. David may never be able to speak clearly, if at all. And even if he does, don't expect much. There's not much that somebody with a disability could do with this condition. So they advised my parents to put me in an institution. That way, at least I could enjoy what life I had, and I wouldn't be a burden to them. In 1971, this was the status quo. But luckily for me, my parents are going to take an agile mindset. They didn't want to make one single decision that would define the rest of my life. Rather, they would inspect and adapt to see what somebody with a disability could do to have a fulfilling life. Whatever it would be, they would test it by doing to know for sure. So that was working with the school boards. It was working with physiotherapists and occupational therapists, not just to get me into regular school, but to really help me get included into school so I can be part of the class. They co-created this with a whole group of professionals to make it work. And as I got older, they even started including me in the change because they knew I would have to be my own advocate long after they were gone. So now when I go into organizations, they bring me in as the agile expert. They're like, Dave, we want to be agile. I'm like, okay. Why? And they're like, to be agile. And I'm like, we're going in circles here. Why do you want to be? Because if you don't know the why you want to be agile, you shouldn't even try because you need purpose. Those organizations that find out why they want to be agile and change are the ones that succeed, whether it's to get to market quicker, whether it's to deliver product or service, whatever it is, to find that to find that need to change. And what I like to encourage them is to not do that change alone. You hire a lot of talented and diverse individuals from all different levels of the organization and different groups. Bring them part of the change, because you know what? They're actually the closest ones to the work, so why not get them to be part of the change? Just like my parents, they could empathize what it was like to live with a disability, but they didn't know. They had to involve me in the change to get my perspective. So when we involve people doing the work in the change, getting them involved, they can help support and move it to the line. That's the power of diverse thinking, and it's inclusive in using that diversity. Let me give you an example. Let's say while you were here listening to these talks, your people are back in your office. They decided to rearrange your office. They rearrange your desk, they log into your computer, change your programs, keyboards and mouse, everything. You come back to work trying to catch up on your deadlines, and you're like, what the? You try to log in, you can't find something, but you have the pressure to deliver like you did before the change. How does that make you feel? That's what I'm talking about. If you're not part of the change, you're going to resist the change. So as leaders, you work so hard to hire these people. They probably have more skills than you in certain domains. Today's leader doesn't need to know everything. They just need how to orchestrate everything and have people bring their best talents forward. This draws the next biggest challenge when I go to large organizations. Majority of the decisions are made by few at the top. So organizations are stifled with trying to change in agility because they're waiting for a decision to be made. The cost of waiting for a decision is killing organizations more than ever. Just by a show of hands, this is a safe place, right? The Vegas rules. There's only a video camera. How many of you are waiting on how to move forward for waiting for a decision from someone right now, by show of hands? Okay, let me turn this around. How many of you are holding back people from going forward because they're waiting for a decision from you? It just got real, didn't it? But this is what I mean. I got to encourage leaders to push that decision-making down. And I get it. The decision gives you the control and comfort that you know everything. Leaders got to embrace their vulnerability, strip that clothing of decision-making to be able to help people make decisions quicker. Because when you push decision-making quicker, teams can iterate by making mistakes. That way they can quickly try something, go, oh, this didn't work, fix it, or do another, fix it. So that way in a certain time frame, you're getting the best solution, not just the first one. And they get to learn to make mistakes and grow ideas. I can fix a wrong decision a lot quicker than I can fix a non-decision. So just getting them comfortable to do it. And I learned vulnerability when I had to go away for university. When I was 18, up until 18, luckily my parents did my personal support care, where they got me up, showered me, and got me off to school. So when I decided to move out of my hometown to go to university, I was gonna hire perfect strangers to be able to just days later shower me naked in front of them. They're touching me in places. I'm conditioned to not let strangers touch me. My parents had to trust me that I was making the decision, and I had to trust myself that I was making the right decision to put myself in front of those. Because if I tried to dress myself and control everything, I would have never got out the door. By giving up control, I was actually getting control. Let me ask all of you, there's a lot of people in this room. I want you to make eye contact with somebody in this room. Go make eye contact with somebody. No, don't look at me. Go make eye contact with somebody and look into their eyes. Now hold it, hold it. Now what if I told you that immediately after my talk, you were gonna be naked in front of this person? and they were going to be showering you. Some of you might have got a date later, but this is what I tried to do, bring people together. But this is the vulnerability I'm talking about. Now, I mentioned leader a lot. Is leader a title? Is a leader prestige? Is it a thing of authority? While you're thinking about this, let me tell you about my personal support worker, Amy. Amy comes to my house every morning at 6 a.m. She showers me, gets me ready for work so I could go into Scotiabank and bring my best self forward. She dedicates herself and makes sure that I can bring my very best to what I do. She's even traveled with me to Calgary from Toronto so I can even amplify a louder voice. She doesn't have a fancy title, and sadly her position's looking down upon. But Amy is one of the greatest leaders I know. How many of you are willing to shower someone to make your organization better? And the only good thing about an organization with great leaders is a whole organization full of leaders. So leaders' job has to be to make people feel comfortable, to be wrong. Because in the corporate world, I know, because I went down the path, I was afraid to be wrong. Because think about it, I didn't make any decisions until I became director. And then for not having any experience, because previous to then, I just had to exercise other people's decisions. Now I had to make all the decisions at the highest point in my career where I've never ever done it before. What if I'm wrong? Are people going to second guess me? Are they going to judge me? Are they, because we always reward those that get it right, but we don't reward the courage to get it wrong. And previous to the 2 years ago, I used to not talk about my personal story. I didn't want to share my vulnerability because everybody thinks a leader gets to where they are because they avoid making mistakes, not embracing and learning from them. So as a leader's job, we have to create an environment where everybody feels like they're a leader. They can make mistakes, learn from it, grow back up. If you fall, we're going to pick you back up. We're going to do that. And I learned that as I was preparing for that 5K walk. As you could tell, I was training for 3 years. I was working out, and I'll say it, I was buff. I was looking damn good and conditioned. But I couldn't get past the half kilometer. As I was training, I would let 500 feet and I would stop. Not because I was tired, not because I didn't have the energy, but I was afraid to fall. Because up until 43 years, I never walked, so I never had to fall. And now I had to fall when I was the tallest I would ever be, 5'5", whatever. But if you've never fallen, you think of the worst. Is it gonna hurt? Is it gonna sting? Am I gonna break something? Are people gonna doubt that I can do the walk? Are they gonna think all these things? Because these voices get in our head. And I couldn't get past the 500 feet. But the one day I pushed further. And guess what happened? I fell. It stung, but I was like, all my anxieties came. But my trainer, Alex, is right there, and he picked me back up. And we walked another kilometer, and I fell back down. When another kilometer, he picked me back up. He goes, every time you fall, I'm gonna be here to pick you back up. So when I knew I could fall and somebody was there to pick me back up, I could walk further than I ever thought I could be. So that day when I crossed that finish line, I never learned to walk 5 kilometers. I just learned to get back up. So I'd like to leave you with 3 things. Whenever you're leading through a change or a new initiative, bring all your diverse people around you to begin to think and co-create the vision. Don't tell them what the change is going to be. That's too convenient. Ask them, what should it be? What should it do? Utilize all that diverse talent that you work so hard to get. 2, Start pushing decision-making down. When I coach leaders, I give them a metric. I want to see for whatever one decision you make, that your team makes 3. And I measure that because, leaders all like KPIs. That's their dashboard for effectiveness. So when you go back and think of all the decisions you make today, go, should I make those decisions? Am I the best person? And begin to push it down one after one. Because the more vulnerable you get, the more stronger you get. Now I can get naked in front of anyone, but don't worry, I won't do it today. But get used to pushing decision-making down. And 3, lastly, you have to make it safe to fail. I want you to go back and share one of your biggest professional screw-ups you've ever made with your team. Because when they see somebody they respect make mistakes to get to where they are, you create an environment where everybody can share their mistakes. I do this thing every 2 weeks with my team called the biggest fuck up of the week. And we share stories. Sorry, I guess I should have told the censor dude. But we share our biggest mistakes, and me included, so that way we can get a mistake as an opportunity to learn. A mistake is an opportunity to innovate. Because when we all share them and we learn from them, it becomes less taboo and we can all make it. What I told you today might sound idealistic or even unrealistic. But you know what? It's an unrealistic world. So if you don't set those unrealistic goals, you're just not gonna make it. Thank you. It's a new chair. I didn't know it automatically turned off.
Thank you. No, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing your stories with us
right here.
and being so vulnerable.
Thanks.
Now time for Q&A. Get out your phones, folks on the phone as well, and open up the app Slido. Give you a few seconds just to enter some questions, vote them up, and we'll begin.
Good.
All right. Nice job, Jennifer.
If I get-
All right, we'll get started. And before we do, just want to mention that Kathy's brought her mother and daughter here today, and they're going to be selling her books just as you leave the summit today. So thank you, Kathy, and thanks for donating the books to our Golden Ticket Prize as well. All right, we'll get started. First question comes from Steve. We're a 140-plus year company here. So sometimes we think about ourselves as dinosaurs. Sometimes we've used that analogy. But how in our culture change and work that we're doing, how can we learn from the stories that you've shared today? Anyone who'd like to start?
I work in a lot of legacy organizations like banking, insurances, and stuff. I think, first of all, you got to appreciate what got you here today. You guys did amazing things. But start to reinvent of how are people going to use your services in the future? Just start taking bold ideas. And this is why I like agility, because you do small increments to test those. Because when you make failure affordable, you can afford to make mistakes. So come up with an idea, create ideation sessions with everybody in the organization. Create a bunch of ideas, narrow them down to a few, and really make them tight, not to deliver a product or service, but what hypothesis do we have? And how cheaply can we experiment to test that hypothesis? And that way, the cheaper it can, you can build from those ideas and do that. But it's really using everybody across your organization. The leaders can't do it because they're not in the front line every day. Utilize that bottom-up intelligence and think about how you're going to run experiments. And don't make a business case for it, because business cases assume you know the outcome. And we've all written business cases, it's fictional writing. But let's think about it's a hypothesis and really validate it, because if you're not willing to invest into being wrong, you can never reinvent. So be brave enough to invest into that first step, because eventually that first step will lead its way to 5K or 30K.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that, and one of the things that I would build on top of that to say is, I think every day we face problems or things that go off the rails in our projects, or someone doesn't show up or is not delivering, or the government changes a regulation. We're thrown obstacles all the time. What I would say is think about, how can I be part of the solution? And it's just so much easier to point a finger and say, well, that's, I'm waiting on a decision over here, or the mothership is saying, well, we can't do that. Just say, how can I help be part of that solution? And I think one of the things that Kathy said earlier really resonates as well, is don't let the past define you. So even though you're a 140-year-old company, don't be hamstrung by your past, and think about what you can be in the future. So you get to define what that future is going to be. So I would say those are the two things that would stand out for me that you can take away.
For me, just from my perspective, my office is different than yours. So from what I've learned, that it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what your background is. What matters is what you bring for yourself and to your job. It doesn't matter the circumstances. What matters is the perspective. And that, for me, I was the third woman hired on site, where there was like 140 women on, like right now. It was huge. It was very different, very difficult for me. But I didn't let that stop me. What I did is I used it as fuel to continue to empower through it. So yes, you can use your obstacles, but use them as fuels and to create your own solutions and bring your whole self to work.
We've talked about today bringing your whole self to work. Next question is about bringing your whole self home, and how can we apply agility in our personal lives? Whoever would like to start?
Okay, well, for me, I work 10 days on at site. So I fly to work, and then I take a 45-minute bus ride. And when I'm at work, I'm at work. That's it, full focus. I sit in that truck for 13 hours a day. Literally, I just eat, sleep, work, eat, sleep, work. So when I fly home, it's very easy for me to not take work home because it's as if I get two separate lives. I am a Gemini, though. That does kind of help. I apply my agility in my sense of adventure in the things. I have 10 days off. I'm not limiting myself to anything. I mean, everywhere I go, I don't go and sit in these posh places. I mean, I go to the hood, right? I want to find where I can make a difference, where I can make a change. I apply agility every day of the week that I can make a change where I am at whatever moment I can find.
I would say for me, one is knowing yourself as well. I think self-reflection is really important. There's a lot, like our lives are full of noise. Every minute we're getting a text message or an email. There's so many distractions, I think, in our day-to-day lives. So find a way that you can have some quietness in your life and actually think straight is the starting point, I would say. So self-reflection is really important. And then also, I like to read. It brings ideas. Obviously, it's very educational. Knowledge is power. But the more I read about different things, it stimulates ideas. And then find that space where you're most creative. And for me, a big part of that is running. When I'm running, it's just like the ideas are flowing. And I get back, and I got to write them down, or I often carry my phone with me on silent, and jot them down. But think about where you generate your best ideas, and then think about, again, how you turn them into action.
Agility is all about transparency, inspecting, and adapting. before you can inspect something, you got to do it. It's being brave enough to fall. It's just taking a chance and doing it, even if it feels uncomfortable, because you can't be agile in your personal lives unless you're willing to face the uncomfortableness. If you want to change or move, you know what? It's not easy. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be a struggle. Do it, but then, like what Blaine said, reflect on it. How can you do it better? A personal agility is not about doing it perfectly. It's about just doing it and learn to do it better.
And just starting. Sometimes, like seriously, we have the ideas. It's just that first step is the hardest one.
Yeah.
So on that note, take the first step and you fail. And folks want to know, Dave and others, what is your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
My biggest professional failure probably was I was a product manager for a software company. And the product we were building wasn't selling. Customers weren't intake using it. But I'm like, if I just build more features, if we just keep building it, then they'll use it. Instead of just taking a moment and asking the customers, what is it you need, or why isn't this meeting your need, and apply that learning right to the beginning. It was assuming I knew more than the people that were receiving our product. So that was my biggest mistake, and now why I love agility.
Well, I'd say for me, one of my biggest failures when I look back was not listening to my gut and intuition through a period of my career where I was kind of pushed into a lot of responsibility that was over my head, and it was kind of twofold. One was internally, just the amount of work was very stressful for me. And I was really struggling, and I was a pleaser and afraid to put my hand up and say, I'm struggling, I'm drowning. And then secondly, at the same time, which made it even worse, was I had a client who was a bully on a project that they wanted to overstep some engineering guidelines and take a risk, and we had a failure on a project, and that was very stressful. So that was probably the biggest one for me, but the learning was, for me, to listen to what I know is best and don't let others influence you beyond what you know you should be doing.
Losing my nursing career was by far the biggest one that was really hard for me. And not taking care of myself, not knowing how to take care of myself. The last day I was nursing, I was at the Grey Nuns on the medical unit, and I was working the night shift, and I'm looking at my patient list, and I could not read it. I could not see the words because I had so repressed, and I knew I was done, right? So I went from the medical unit down to the psychiatric unit, and in between the two, I lost my mind, right? And I was actually pounding on the door saying, let me in, let me in. They actually called security, get her out, get her out. But through that, it was the first time that I actually spoke with someone. I was 40 at the time, and to acknowledge, okay, well, maybe there's a problem here. So through the ultimate failure of losing my nursing career, it actually enabled me to grow and learn how to do something else, which was really difficult. I mean, when you're changing careers at 42, let me tell you, it's not easy, especially learning to be a heavy equipment operator. But yeah, it was learning to transition and accept me for something that I never was able to before.
So Kathy, you have the unique perspective of being worked inside Imperial, understanding our culture and some of the challenges. And one question is about wearing a mask to work, and you shared that you, for years, wore a mask. How can we help our peers and our team members remove their mask at the office? Is there one or two things we could do differently?
The one thing, like I shared earlier in my story, by my having the courage to stand up in front of my peers, I'm not saying to do that, and be vulnerable and just be real, it changed the whole entire dynamics in the workplace, because all of a sudden we're not talking about, you know, the weather and, you know, the superficial stuff. People are feeling open enough because now they know, since I shared, that they can approach me and be real and on a personal level. That changed everything. I mean, I wasn't kidding. People from all different departments that I don't even know are coming to see me, pull me aside, and we're talking. Had I not been vulnerable, had I not just said, hey, you know, this is what's going on, people wouldn't know, number one, and number two, they wouldn't feel at ease enough or comfortable enough to approach me. So for yourselves, if you can find that one person, I'm not saying telling the whole office your whole everything, but if you can find that one person that you're in the workplace to share with, well, you might be just surprised what they have to share right back, right? And it creates a bond. It really, really does.
This reminds me, when I got my first job, I was so happy to finally get my first job. Because even though I graduated, had great grades, even when I get an interview, I couldn't get into the building sometimes because things weren't accessible yet in the 90s. So when I got my first job, I was so excited until about 9:30 when I decided to go to the washroom, my chair couldn't get in the bathroom. And I didn't feel comfortable to ask or safe enough to ask. So I held it every day for 12 hours for 3 years. Dry pants should be a right, not a privilege. But it wasn't until I started getting success at work. My boss finally came to me one day because I was really creating efficiencies at every department. He goes, Dave, what can I do to help you make your job better? And I'm like, you can make the washroom accessible. I'd like to go pee. And at first he got mad because he goes, why didn't you come to me? But then he realized afterwards, as a leader, he should have asked me what he could do for me to bring my best self to work. Because my thing was to go to the bathroom, but somebody might have childcare issues or whatever. Leaders need to ask personally what they can do for their employee so they can do their best work they ever imagined. And it's not just related to around work, but what can they do to support that individual? So like try to find the one person comfortable, but as a leader, create that safe space where you can ask and begin to take action to make that happen.
That's great advice. And I would say, that the more of a mask you carry on, you develop baggage in a way that, because you're never your true authentic self. And every time you're interacting with someone, you're never being, truly, you're not truly connecting with people. How many people do you know that you've worked with for years or quasi friends that you really don't know them? And it's not till you open up and share, like, if we're considered success up here, just listen to the challenges that we've all faced. And when you share those challenges, that's how you actually truly make a human connection with people. And I think back to some of the challenges that we've faced, and sleepless nights at the hospital and going to work, and when someone says, how's it going? And if I say it's good, like, it's not. I had a shitty night, actually. Evan's been in the hospital for weeks, and we don't know what's going on. But at least people know what's going on in your life, and it's not like this aura or this cloud or taboo, but we can have real conversations, and it really helped me connect with my colleagues and actually do my job, because my boss was just like, Blaine, we got this.
Great advice. Shifting gears a little bit, Blaine and Dave, you have the unique perspective of not knowing us very well before you walked in the door today. So curious to understand, what are your perceptions of Imperial and Esso?
I'll let Blaine go first.
Oh.
Or open and honest.
Safety first. I've been through many of your safety orientations, so you're a safety leader. That, honestly, I'm not kidding. That really does stand out, and it's authentic, and you care. I've spent a fair bit of time up at Norman Wells and in Cold Lake at some of your facilities doing some engineering work. So that's one of the perceptions I had. Very process-oriented. It takes a long time to get things done. It's sort of the antithesis of agility, to be honest. And a lot of rungs on the ladder of people who need to make decisions. So it's very hierarchical, was the impression I got. And ironically, last weekend my kid was at a track meet, and I bumped into a mutual friend that we hadn't seen in a long time, and she just recently had left Imperial, and she used the word dinosaur. So that's another word that comes to mind. It's just a company that's just slow to change and adjust with the times, but also a very reputable company and doing great things.
So,
I'm being honest.
so first off, I want to thank you for putting gas in our car for us to drive there. My first experience, and we'll be honest here, was when I was trying to do the administrative things to even come here today. It was so painful. I was like, living with cerebral palsy is a lot easier than going through these administrating processes. And I had to email, but what I liked about it was painful, but yet they took the feedback and did something to make it a lot easier. So it's one thing to have all this pain, but it's another to have the urge and willingness to respond to fix that. So that's both sides of the story.
Yes, no, thank you. We are working on it for sure over the last number of years. I can say that our leadership team showed a lot of vulnerability about 18 months ago. They did an open survey and really asked detailed open questions about what our perceptions were of our own company and how we felt. And the recognition was a lot needed to change, and leaders didn't have the answers. And so everyone needs to be part of the solution, and which is one of the reasons why Imperial Talks was born. From employees and contractors who wanted to see change and hear outside perspectives to help us. So thank you. We'll close on just one final question. Lots of information and amazing stories shared. What's the one message you want folks to hear when they walk out to the door today and remember from what you shared?
I'll say step up and be part of the solution. You know, when you see a problem, just switch your mindset to why you can do something versus why you can't. If everybody did that throughout the day, think about the thousands of colleagues that you have. Like, that is an incremental shift in mindset.
You know, you can, like I was talking earlier about being you can be your own biggest obstacles, and you can stop yourself out of fear or out of whatever that's preventing you from advancing in life. Sometimes it just takes a moment to step away from it and change your perspective. Look at it from a different viewpoint and remember that you are your own solution, that you can, through mindset and through willingness and learning to believe in who you are is the biggest thing, right? And that you can achieve anything. You can do anything. Just believe in yourself.
You know, it's interesting. I have a lot of people that come to me and go, "You've overcome cerebral palsy." And I'm like, "Nope, still got it." But I've learned to live with it, right? And you got to learn to live with whatever struggle it is. We all have disabilities, just some are more visible than others. But leaning off what Blaine said is, when you focus on the problems, don't go maybe right to a solution. Think of experiments. Because a lot of times we're human, we go to solution mode right away. Let's fully understand the problem. Think about the experiments to validate that problem, and then that will give you the solution. Don't jump into solution, because humans, we have a whole bag full of solutions looking for a problem.
Well, as you can see, we've also turned the tables and are asking all of you to answer a question as we wrap, is what one action that you will take as you leave this room and do differently. And hopefully it's not fail, but if you fail, you're learning. As you can see, the word cloud being formed.
But see, no, that's the notion we got to avoid. When we see failure, we think of it as a bad thing. That's a learning opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And set goals. I do want to thank you. We are going to wrap with a representative from senior leadership who's here, Barry Murphy, to share some closing remarks. And also want to remind you, today there's Indigenous Awareness Week, and there'll be food trucks at lunchtime in the courtyard for everyone to enjoy. So, Barry, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura, and I hope that everybody in the audience here today and all those participating across the country have been inspired the same way that I have been in terms of listening to these amazing stories from our speakers. So I would just ask everybody just a really big heartfelt round of applause for our speaker. We do these employee forums because we need people to think differently. to think about us not as the dinosaur, but as the company of the future. This thinking differently, it really is all about what we're trying to achieve in terms of with our country strategy. In fact, our country strategy starts with us thinking differently, then translating that thinking into ideas, and then translating that idea into action. I'd ask everybody as we kind of leave here today and we spend some time reflecting, whether that's at home with our families, whether that's back in our workplace in terms of with our teams and our peers, what are the things that we can do differently in terms of how we think about our lives and the role that we play in terms of within work? When we start to think about that, then what is the action? What is the leadership action that each of us can do in order to help that occur? And guess what? You may not know the answer. And that's okay, because we are a team. When you have those ideas, reach out to other members of your team, other members of your family. I've got this great idea. Help me find the leadership path forward so that I can bring that to life. That's my ask in terms of everyone here today. So again, a great forum, powerful messages. I'm a firm believer that if we really want to, the best way for us to predict the future is for us to create the future. So I encourage everybody here today, bring those ideas forward, translate them into action, and let's create our future. Thank you very much.